The hum of the ship's engines vibrated through the floors of the command deck. Captain Leela Navarro stood at the center, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. The image of Vanguard Station, Earth's last remaining fortress in the stars, flickered as incoming data poured in from the farthest reaches of their sensors. The Zaldar fleet was on the move, with their formidable armada approaching the station's orbit. The time for diplomacy had passed. Earth's fate now hung in the balance. Leela clenched her jaw. They were vastly outnumbered, and their technology, though powerful, was nothing compared to the alien force closing in. She could feel the weight of responsibility bearing down on her, the crushing knowledge that every decision she made from this point forward could be their last. All ships on standby. Leela barked, her voice steady but laced with tension. Prepare for immediate defensive action. Commander Brigham, I want the fleet at full alert. No surprises. Commander Marcellus Brigham, her second in command, gave a sharp nod, his dark eyes betraying a flicker of concern. He had been through battles before, but the sheer scale of what was coming seemed to hit even him. Aye, Captain. All ships ready. Leela's gaze shifted to the viewscreen that stretched across the far wall of the bridge. The cold expanse of space lay before them, dotted with stars, yet all she could see now was the massive, encroaching shadow of the Zaldar fleet. The enemy ships, dark and angular, loomed like a storm on the horizon. There were hundreds of them, maybe more. They were methodical in their approach, showing no signs of hesitation or fear. As the hours passed, the station's perimeter defenses came online, bright energy shields flashing across the dark void. But Leela knew these barriers would only hold for so long. The Zaldar's weapons were known to be devastating, and their ability to adapt in battle was legendary. Even the most sophisticated human tech would crumble beneath their assault. Leela's fingers hovered over a console. Her eyes flickered over the data streams that flooded her system, scanning for anything that might give them an edge. That's when it happened. A subtle ping, buried in the system. She tapped the console. A series of encrypted files appeared, older than the station itself. They were marked with one simple word: Vanguard. Brigham, come here, Leela called sharply. I think I've found something. The commander approached, his brow furrowed in confusion. What is it, Captain? I don't know yet, but we need to decode it. She tapped a sequence of buttons, watching as the files slowly opened, revealing strange symbols, patterns, and diagrams that seemed almost alien in nature. The encryption was complex, more so than any human-made code. Yet the language, it was familiar. She had seen these symbols before, in the lost archives of Earth's greatest scientific minds, an ancient human civilization that had vanished millennia ago. These were the blueprints for something hidden deep within Vanguard Station itself. Captain, Brigham's voice was sharp. The Zaldar have entered the station's vicinity. They're launching their first wave. We can't waste any more time. Leela's heart pounded. She glanced at the holographic map of the station's defenses. No, we need to know what this is. If it's what I think it is, it might be the key to winning this war. Just as she said the words, alarms blared, and the floor beneath her feet shuddered violently. The first salvo of Zaldar weapons struck Vanguard Station with a deafening boom, sending shockwaves through the hull. The battle had begun. Leela's pulse quickened, but she didn't move. Not yet. Brigham, send a message to the fleet. All ships, hold formation. This is only the beginning. Understood, Captain. The room buzzed with activity as crew members scrambled to manage the incoming fire. Lila's eyes never left the encrypted files, now fully decoded. There was a map, and more importantly, a set of coordinates that pointed to something ancient, buried in the depths of the station. Something that, if unlocked, could change everything. Leela's gaze sharpened. Prepare the fleet for a counterattack. This isn't just a fight for our survival. It's a fight for humanity's future. She turned toward the comms officer. Patch me through to all ships. We need to push back now. Earth's last hope is here. As the Zaldar fleet continued its assault, Leela knew the real battle had just begun. And it wasn't just for the survival of the station. It was for the secret weapon humanity had hidden away for centuries. The key to victory, if they could just unlock it in time. The deafening roar of weapons fire shook the command deck as Leela Navarro gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white. Outside, the Zaldar fleet had launched their first full-scale barrage. The station's defensive shields flared in a desperate attempt to hold back the onslaught, but Leela knew it was only a matter of time before they were overwhelmed. The shields, impressive as they were, could only absorb so much before they buckled under the strain. "Shields at 60%, Captain," Brigham called out from his post, his voice tight with stress. "We've got multiple breaches in Sector 5 and 12. Casualties reported." Leela's mind raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. "Initiate secondary defenses in those sectors, seal off damaged areas, and reroute power to the shields." She turned to the comms officer. "Get me a full report from all fleet commanders. I need to know exactly where we stand." The officer's fingers flew across the controls, and the holographic projections shifted as data from the fleet began to fill the air. Their ships were scattered across the outer reaches of the system, desperately trying to create a perimeter around Vanguard Station. But the Zaldar were relentless, launching wave after wave of precision strikes with their advanced weaponry. Even their smaller ships were packing the kind of firepowered humanity had never seen before. Leela's heart sank as she saw the grim reports. The fleet was outmatched, and even their superior tactics weren't enough to break through the Zaldar's defenses. The Zaldar ships were too well coordinated, their movements almost calculated, as if they were prepared for everything the humans had thrown at them. "Captain," Brigham's voice cut through her thoughts. "We've got another problem. Something's interfering with our communications. It's like a jamming signal, but far more advanced. We're losing contact with the outer fleets." Leela's gaze darkened. The Zaldar had always been known for their technological superiority, but this was something new. "Get our best engineers on it," she ordered, "and make sure those outer fleets know to stay in formation. We need them for the counterattack." The command center hummed with the rush of activity as officers and crew scrambled to respond to the growing crisis. But Leela could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on her. They were losing, and fast. Their only hope was the artifact, the key they'd uncovered in the previous battle. She looked at the data stream again, scrutinizing the encrypted files she'd accessed earlier. The map, the coordinates, it was all there. A hidden vault on the station, buried deep within its core, that might hold the weapon that could shift the balance of the war. It wasn't much, but it was humanity's only chance. Leela slammed her fist against the console. They had to get to that vault, no matter the cost. "Brigham," she said, her voice low but determined. "We're not waiting for reinforcements. Prepare a team. We're going down to that vault." Briham's eyes widened in disbelief. "Captain, the station's under siege. We can't leave the command deck unprotected." "We have no choice," Leela snapped. "We need that weapon, and we need it now. If we don't act, the Zaldar will tear us apart before we even have a chance to fight back." Brigham hesitated, then nodded grimly. "Understood, Captain. I'll assemble a team. But we'll need a distraction to make sure we can get in and out undetected." Leela nodded. "I'll take care of that. Get ready." As Brigham left to gather the team, Leela turned her attention to the viewport once more. The Zaldar ships continued to close in, their enormous silhouettes looming ever closer. A sense of urgency gripped her chest. Time was slipping away, and if they didn't act now, the weapon hidden in the vault would be lost, along with humanity's last hope. "Captain," the comms officer said, "we're detecting an unusual energy reading coming from the Zaldar flagship." Leela's eyes narrowed. "What kind of reading?" "It's..." The officer paused, adjusting the data feed. "It's a massive energy buildup. They're preparing for a superweapon strike." The cold realization hit like a punch to the gut. The Zaldar were planning to obliterate Vanguard Station with a single blow. Shields can't hold against that kind of firepower, Brigham muttered under his breath as he returned to the command center, his face pale. We'll be reduced to debris in seconds. Leela didn't flinch. We'll make sure they don't get the chance. Prepare the fleet to launch a full offensive. Now. She didn't wait for confirmation. With the Zaldar on the cusp of unleashing their most devastating weapon, there was no more time to waste. She had one shot at stopping them, and it was all tied to that vault. Whatever was hidden inside it, whatever it took to get it, they would fight to the last man and woman to unlock his power. Move out, she commanded. We make our stand here. And with that, the crew of Vanguard Station began to prepare for humanity's final fight against the Zaldar, knowing that their survival depended on a dangerous mission deep within the heart of their own station. The corridor walls of Vanguard Station hummed with urgency as Captain Leela Navarro and her team raced toward the vault's location. Her boots thudded against the steel floor, the echo of their hurried footsteps filling the empty hallways. The faint stench of burning electronics and ozone hung in the air, evidence of the Zaldar's relentless assault. Every few moments, a tremor would ripple through the station as another impact hit its outer hull. Time was not on their side. Leela's team, an elite group of soldiers and engineers, moved swiftly but cautiously. Their mission was simple: get to the vault before the Zaldar could track them down. But nothing about this operation was simple. The deeper they went into the station, the more the atmosphere thickened with tension. It wasn't just the external threat of the enemy. It was the oppressive sense that something was wrong. Something about the vault felt alive, as if it had been waiting for them. Captain, Lieutenant Ash, one of the station's best engineers, said, his voice low. The maps we have of this station aren't complete. The vault's location is off the grid. It's almost as if the station was built around it. Lila's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Is it hidden? Ash nodded, his face pale but resolute. Not hidden exactly. It's concealed. It's not just a storage room or a weapons depot. Whatever's in there, it's not meant to be found by just anyone. Leela's gut tightened. She had felt something strange in the encrypted files when she had decoded them. But it wasn't the time to second-guess. They needed to move quickly, and if Ash was right, the clock was ticking down on more than just the station's defenses. Stay focused, she ordered, her voice steady. We're getting to that vault. As they rounded a corner, an alarm blared throughout the station. A deep, throbbing tone reverberated off the walls, signaling that the Zaldar had breached another sector. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the hallway. A cold, metallic silence descended, followed by the distant hum of enemy troops advancing. Enemies inbound, Sergeant Devlin, a sharp-eyed veteran, reported, gripping his weapon tightly. We'll need to clear them out before we continue. Leela glanced over her shoulder. Do what you have to do, but we can't afford to waste time. Devlin and his team moved into position, setting up a barricade near a nearby doorway. Leela, her hand resting on the cool surface of the station's walls, listened carefully. The quiet murmurs of the Zaldar soldiers grew louder, their foreign dialect cutting through the static-filled air. They were getting closer. We can't afford a prolonged fight here, Leela said, her voice low but commanding. We need to keep them on their toes. Ash, do you have anything to disrupt their systems? Ash's fingers flew over his handheld console. I can trigger a false signal to make it look like a backup generator is malfunctioning in Sector 8. That'll send them in the opposite direction. It'll give us a window to advance. Leela nodded. Do it. And keep your comms open. If anything goes wrong, we bail out fast. With Ash's fingers hovering over the keys, he manipulated the station's power grid, feeding false information into the Zaldar's tracking systems. The seconds seemed to stretch into hours as the team waited, the tense silence punctuated only by the distant footsteps of the enemy. Then, as if on cue, the Zaldar's movements shifted. They're moving away, Ash confirmed, his eyes wide with a mix of relief and anxiety. It's working. We have 15 minutes. Let's move, Leela said, already turning back toward the darkened corridor ahead. They moved quickly, each step echoing in the void of the station's depths. The walls seemed to close in around them as they navigated the maze-like corridors. It was like a living entity itself, breathing and shifting as they went deeper. The further they traveled, the more the sense of being watched grew. It was as if something, or someone, was aware of their presence. Then, at last, they reached a heavy, reinforced door. The ancient symbols etched into its surface glowed faintly, matching the markings Leela had seen in the artifact. Her heart raced as she stepped forward, instinctively reaching for the panel next to the door. Captain Ashstead, stepping forward with his console. This is it. This is the vault. Leela's breath caught in her throat as Ash typed in the access code. For a moment, nothing happened. The door remained closed, as if resisting their intrusion. Then, with a soft hiss, the ancient door slid open, revealing an inner sanctum. The air inside felt colder, unnaturally so. The room was vast, but there was little inside. Only a pedestal at its center, upon which rested a small, glowing orb. It pulsated with a strange energy, humming softly, as though alive. "Is this?" Brigham started, but his voice faltered as he stepped forward, awe creeping into his tone. Leela's eyes were locked on the orb. She knew without a doubt that this was the weapon, the key to humanity's survival, or perhaps its destruction. But as she reached out to touch it, a chill ran down her spine. Something wasn't right. Before anyone could react, the door slammed shut behind them, sealing them inside the vault. The lights flickered out, leaving them in total darkness, and the orb's hum grew louder, more intense. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged, one Leela had hoped she would never see again. "Welcome, Captain Navarro," the voice sneered. "I've been expecting you." Leela's hand froze just inches from the glowing orb. The voice that emerged from the shadows sent a ripple of dread through her. It was calm, almost mocking, eerily familiar. She straightened, her senses on high alert, instinctively reaching for her sidearm. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, its movements deliberate and slow. The silhouette was humanoid, but there was something about it, something wrong. The air seemed to grow heavier, the oppressive weight of the vault pressing in from all sides. As the figure stepped into the dim light, Layla's heart skipped a beat. The man standing before them wasn't just any soldier. He was someone she knew, someone she had trusted, someone she had thought long dead. "Captain Navarro," he said again, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "It's been a long time." "Damien?" Layla's voice was barely a whisper, a wave of shock crashing over her. How are you alive?" Damien Voss, once a high-ranking officer in Earth's military, stood before her, unscathed, untouched by the years that had passed. He had vanished years ago during a covert mission to investigate a rogue faction of the Zaldar. At the time, they had presumed him dead. Now, seeing him alive in front of her was a blow she wasn't prepared for. Damien's smile widened as he stepped closer, his black uniform blending into the shadows of the vault. His eyes gleamed with something cold, something dangerous. "Dead? No, I was reborn. You see, Captain, I've always known humanity's greatest weakness." Lila's pulse quickened as she tried to process what she was hearing. The betrayal was almost too much to comprehend. "What are you talking about? You really don't understand, do you?" Damien sneered, his hand brushing the side of his face as if dismissing her confusion. "This vault, it isn't just a weapon. It's the answer to humanity's survival, and your kind has been hiding it from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. Your precious Earth had a plan all along, but you've failed to see the bigger picture." Layla's mind raced. What was he talking about? Earth had always been under attack by the Zaldar, fighting for survival. They had only one goal, to protect the human race from extinction. But Damien's words twisted in her mind like a poison. Damien took a step forward, his voice growing darker. "You see, the The Zaldar were never meant to be humanity's enemy. They were meant to be our salvation. Salvation. Leela felt the word burn in her mouth. You've lost your mind. Damien chuckled softly. No, Captain. I've seen the truth. The weapon inside this vault was never meant to fight the Zaldar. It's a tool for ascension. The merging of humanity and Zaldar, forging a new empire that will reign over the galaxy. This was always Earth's plan. The Zaldar were never our enemies. They were the key to our evolution. Leela shook her head in disbelief. You're insane. We fought the Zaldar for decades. They've slaughtered millions of innocent people. They've destroyed colonies, our colonies. And they've done so because they were manipulated. Damien shot back, his voice rising. Humanity has always been the aggressor. The war we fought was a lie. You've been too blind to see it. But I've learned what you refuse to believe. The Zaldar are not invaders. They were chosen to help us, chosen to correct the mistakes of humanity. All this destruction, all this bloodshed, it's all been a test for the true leaders to emerge. And now, I am that leader. Leela's heart pounded in her chest. She struggled to process the madness in Damien's words. The truth seemed so twisted, so upside down. The Zaldar, partners, not enemies. It didn't make sense. Everything they had fought for, everything Earth had endured, had led them to this moment. And yet here stood Damien, claiming that the war had been a fabrication. You're talking about genocide, Leela said coldly, her voice unwavering despite the confusion swirling inside her. You want to erase humanity's identity and merge with an alien species that has only ever sought to wipe us out. Damien's eyes burned with fanatic conviction. No, I want humanity to evolve, to ascend beyond the primitive mindset that's kept you in the dark for so long. And now that you're here, it's too late to stop it. The weapon inside the vault. He gestured to the glowing orb, which pulsed faster now, as if reacting to his words. It's a catalyst to begin the merging process, and I'm the one who will lead us all into a new era. Leela stood frozen, fury building within her. Every instinct screamed at her to act, to stop him before he could do any more damage. The vault, the weapon, it wasn't meant for this. It wasn't meant for anything Damien had in mind. You're wrong, she said, her voice gaining strength. This ends now. You may have tricked others, but I'll make sure humanity doesn't fall for your lies. Damien's smirk faded, replaced with a look of cold determination. You don't get it, do you, Leela? It's already too late. The vault has already activated. Before she could react, the orb in the center of the room blazed with brilliant, blinding light, filling the chamber with a pulse so powerful that it rattled the walls. The ground beneath their feet trembled violently as an unnatural hum filled the air, and the vault doors slammed shut, locking them in. The weapon was no longer a secret. It was alive. The blinding light from the orb engulfed the vault, its brilliance so intense that it seemed to cut through Lila's thoughts. The hum grew louder, vibrating in her bones, until it felt like the entire station was shaking. She instinctively shielded her eyes, but the light pierced through even the darkest corners of the room. Damien stood unmoving, his face illuminated by the radiance. You still don't understand, do you, Captain? His voice echoed, distorted by the hum. This is the dawn of a new era. Humanity will no longer fight wars. We will ascend. Leela's heart raced. The orb was no longer just a weapon. It was a force, an energy that seemed to pulse with purpose. The vault's walls groaned under the strain of whatever mechanism had been triggered. The entire room felt alive, as though it were a living organism reacting to Damien's words. Shut it down, Damien, Leela demanded, her voice cutting through the haze of sound. This is madness. You don't know what you're doing. Damien's lips curled into a grin. You still think you can control it? You can't. This is bigger than all of us. The Zaldar knew what they were doing when they brought this here. It's not a weapon. It's a revolution. Leela's mind raced. She needed to think. She needed to stop him. But she was trapped inside this vault with a man she once trusted, someone who had now become a traitor to everything humanity stood for. Her eyes flicked to the glowing orb. It was the key to whatever Damien had planned. But how? The orb was pulsing so intensely that she could feel the energy from it prickling at her skin, and yet there was no visible mechanism or control panel to deactivate it. Suddenly, the walls of the vault began to shift, rearranging themselves as though the room itself were adapting to some unseen force. The hum of the orb amplified, and the temperature in the room dropped to an unnatural chill. "Leela," Brigham called from behind her, his voice tight with alarm. "The station's systems, everything is going offline. It's like the orb is overriding all the power grids. We're losing control of the entire station." Leela clenched her fists, trying to focus past the mounting panic. If the orb could override the station's systems, it wasn't just a weapon, it was a conduit, a power source. And if Damien's plan was true, it could bind the Zaldar and humanity together in ways they couldn't possibly understand. "Damien," Leela shouted, stepping forward. "You have no idea what you're tampering with. If this goes wrong, the entire system could collapse. We could all die." Damien turned his cold eyes toward her, his smile gone. "That's the point. Sacrifice is part of the ascension. The weak will fall away, and the strong will rise. Humanity is on the verge of becoming something more, something greater." Leela shook her head. "You're not making humanity stronger. You're condemning us. You're turning us into the very thing we'd fought against." The orb pulsed faster, and a strange, deep voice echoed through the chamber. The words were not in any language Leela recognized, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a command, an invitation. The Zaldar must have left some form of message embedded in the technology, something ancient and incomprehensible. Without warning, a deep rumbling sound filled the vault, shaking the ground beneath their feet. The orb flared one final time, and in that instant, the walls cracked open, revealing a vortex of swirling energy at its core. It was like a doorway to another realm, rippling with an otherworldly force. Leela's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a portal, a gateway to another dimension, or perhaps to the heart of Zaldar technology. Whatever Damien had unleashed, it was far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. "We're not going to survive this," Brigham muttered, fear in his eyes as he backed toward the door. "We need to get out. Now." But Leela was rooted to the spot, her mind racing. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. The Zaldar had always been more than just an alien threat. They had been manipulators, engineers of humanity's destruction. And Damien, in his obsession with ascension, had unknowingly played right into their hands. "Damien," Leela said, her voice cold, her eyes fixed on him. "This is the end. If you don't stop now, everything we fought for will be wiped out in an instant. We can still make a choice." Damien's expression hardened. "There is no choice, Leela. There is only the future, and you're not a part of it." The vortex in the center of the room grew larger, pulling at the air, as if it were hungry for something or someone. The ground shook violently, and Leela realized that if they didn't act quickly, the entire vault would be consumed by the growing energy. She had only one shot left. "Brigham," she whispered, her hand clenching the edge of her weapon. "Distract him." In one swift motion, Leela drew her sidearm, aiming it at the pedestal holding the orb. She wasn't sure if this would work, but she knew she had to try. The gunfire rang out, sharp and deafening. The orb trembled, then exploded in a blinding flash, sending shockwaves of energy spiraling outward. The vault walls cracked open, but as the light subsided, Leela saw something she hadn't expected. The orb had shattered, its core now gone. The vortex began to flicker and shrink, and the rumbling ceased. For a moment, there was only silence. Damien stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock, his mouth moving but no sound emerging. Leela didn't wait. She turned and sprinted toward the exit, Brigham and the team right behind her. The mission was far from over, but at least for now, they had stopped the worst. They had to. The blinding flash had left the vault in near total darkness. The hum of the orb was gone, replaced by an eerie silence that clung to the air like smoke. Lila's heart pounded in her chest as she sprinted toward the exit, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. Her hand instinctively reached for her comms, but the signal was dead. The vault was a black hole now, a place cut off from everything. "Is it over?" Brigham gasped, his voice tense as he kept pace with her. His breathing was erratic, strained from the chaos of the past few minutes. "I don't know," Lila answered, her voice tight with uncertainty. They had no way of knowing whether the orb had been destroyed or if it had simply activated another phase of Damien's plan. The explosion had been enormous, but the energy had felt like it was still out there, lingering in the station's atmosphere, buzzing at the edges of her senses. They reached the doors, which had been sealed shut after the orb's activation, but with a few quick blows, they pried them open, only to be greeted by the sight of the station's main corridor, a war zone. The walls were scorched, the lights flickering erratically as sparks flew from damaged panels. The Zaldar's forces had made their way through the station, and the damage was evident everywhere. The station had once been a hub of human resilience, a symbol of their defiance, but now it was a crumbling monument to their struggle. Lila's breath caught as she surveyed the scene. Her instincts told her to keep moving, but something gnawed at her, urging her to stop. There was something wrong. Something was missing. "Where are the rest of the survivors?" Brigham muttered under his breath. His eyes scanned the corridor, but they were alone. "Let's head to the command center," Lila said, motioning for the others to follow. "We need to regroup. We need answers." As they navigated the station, the tension only grew. The once bustling halls were eerily quiet, the silence unnerving. The only sound was the occasional crackle of the damaged lights and the soft shuffle of their boots on the cold metal floors. It felt as though the station itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When they finally reached the command center, the sight that greeted them was worse than they had imagined. The control room was in disarray. Monitors flickered on and off, consoles were scorched, and the walls were covered in a layer of thick black ash. The crew members who had been stationed there were either missing or dead, their bodies strewn about in the wake of the Zaldar assault. "Captain," a voice broke through the chaos, making Lila's head snap up. It was Ash, one of the engineers, his face drawn and pale, his uniform torn. He looked as though he had barely escaped with his life. "We've got a problem." "What's happening?" Lila demanded, her voice sharp with concern. Ash's eyes darted around the room nervously. "The Zaldar. They're not retreating. They've adapted. I don't know how, but they've integrated into the station's systems. They've learned from the orb. They've..." Before Ash could finish, the lights in the command center flickered once more, and the entire room seemed to hum with a low, disturbing frequency. A crackling voice filled the room, one that Lila immediately recognized. It was Damien. "Captain Navarro," the voice echoed, distorted but unmistakable. "I told you it was too late. The Zaldar have evolved. They've integrated with the technology of your station, and now they are more than just soldiers. They are everywhere." The sound of a harsh laugh followed, like a twisted symphony of victory. "You've only delayed the inevitable. The portal I activated has opened a doorway not just to a new world, but to a new future, a future where humanity will be led by those who understand the truth. We will be more than what you could ever imagine. You were never meant to lead this revolution, Captain Navarro. I was." Lila's stomach twisted. "Damien," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. "He's alive. He's done something to the station. He's become the Zaldar's weapon," Ash finished grimly. "Somehow, the orb didn't just open a portal. It merged him with them. He's controlling the station. They've integrated his mind with their systems." Leela clenched her fists. No, that's not possible. We destroyed the orb. Ash shook his head. Not completely. We might have stopped one phase, but it's clear now. Damien isn't just trying to control the Zaldar. He's become part of them. The Zaldar are using him as a conduit, and the station is their next step in the evolution of their empire. Leela's mind raced. The Zaldar had always been a formidable force, but Damien had turned them into something worse. Now they were not just invaders. They were everywhere, inside the very systems they had once relied on. They had infiltrated Earth's defenses, and the rebellion against them was slipping away, piece by piece. Damien's merged with the Zaldar, but that's not all, Brigham said, his voice low. This is more than just an invasion. This is a complete transformation. If we don't stop him, he'll bring the entire galaxy to its knees. Leela's gaze hardened. Then we fight. Whatever it takes. We're not giving up this station, or Earth, without a fight. With a deep breath, Leela turned to the team. We're going after Damien. We end this now. Leela's words echoed in the tense silence of the command center. The weight of what they were facing pressed down on them, but the resolve in her voice stirred something deep inside the team. It was clear now. Damien's betrayal had twisted everything they knew. Earth's last line of defense was being consumed from within, and with each passing second, the Zaldar, amplified by Damien's dark transformation, were gaining more ground. Ash was the first to move, pulling up a series of holographic displays on the control panel. His hands flew across the console as he worked to restore some semblance of control over the station's failing systems. The screens flickered briefly, then stabilized. A map of the station appeared, revealing the sprawling network of corridors, bunkers, and control hubs. The Zaldar have already infiltrated the core systems, Ash muttered, his voice tense as he zoomed in on a section of the station. They've corrupted everything, including the weapon platforms and defense grid. Whatever Damien did to merge with them, it's integrated into every facet of this place. Leela stepped closer to the screen, her mind racing as she assessed their options. So the station's systems are compromised, she said, thinking aloud. But is there any way to block Damien's connection to them? Any way to isolate him before he gets full control? There might be one chance, Ash replied, his finger hovering over a blinking red alert on the map. The core system housing the main power reactor. If we can get there and manually trigger a reset, we might sever his link to the station. It won't be easy, though. The Zaldar have set up a blockade near the reactor. There's no telling how many of them are there. Leela looked over at Brigham and the rest of the team. They were battered and worn, but their eyes burned with the same fierce determination that had driven them through every battle. We don't have much time, Leela said, her voice steady despite the growing sense of urgency. If we don't cut off Damien's control now, we'll lose the station and possibly Earth itself. Let's do it, Brigham replied, his jaw clenched. He'd seen the horrors of the Zaldar before, but what Damien had become was a new kind of terror. We take the core, disable the Zaldar, and finish this. We don't stop until it's done. Leela nodded, her mind already on the plan. They had no choice but to push forward, to take the fight straight to the heart of the station and end Damien's reign before it could spread beyond. She felt a spark of anger rise within her, anger at Damien, at the betrayal of everything they had fought for, at the twisted vision he had imposed on humanity. She would not let that vision become reality. All right, everyone, we move out in 10 minutes, Leela ordered. Gather your gear. Stay sharp. This is going to be a long fight, but we're not backing down. As the team dispersed to prepare, Leela turned back to Ash. What about the rest of the crew? Are there any survivors left who can help us? Ash's expression darkened. I don't know. After the initial breach, most of the crew was either killed or absorbed into the Zaldar network. There's a small group of engineers in the lower levels. I'll send a team to make contact with them, but I can't guarantee they'll be able to help us. Leela nodded. But the doubt gnawed at her. The chances of reinforcements were slim, and the Zaldar had already demonstrated their ability to adapt and evolve with terrifying speed. The odds were stacked against them, but that didn't matter. They were humanity's last hope, and they weren't going to let Damien or the Zaldar win. As she turned to leave the command center, she couldn't shake the image of the station's corridors, now twisted and infected by Damien's betrayal. The once proud bastion of Earth's defense was now a labyrinth of darkness, a maze of hostile forces waiting to strike at every turn. The team moved quickly, their weapons at the ready, their minds focused on the mission ahead. The path to the core reactor was lined with Zaldar forces, some still humanoid, others grotesquely altered by their new hybrid forms. It was clear that the Zaldar had learned from their previous defeats. They were no longer just invaders. They were adapting, using the very technology they had once sought to destroy. Every step forward brought them closer to the heart of the station, but the tension in the air grew thicker. The walls seemed to pulse with the same unnatural energy that had emanated from the orb. The entire station felt like it was alive, breathing, twisting under Damien's control. "We're almost there," Leela said as they reached the final approach to the reactor core. "Stay close. We break through, we reset the system, and then we deal with Damien, once and for all." The door to the reactor room loomed before them, its heavy metal frames seemingly unyielding. But Leela knew that inside, the answers they sought, and the battle they would face, awaited. It would be a battle like no other. It would be the final stand of humanity. With a final, resolute breath, Leela motioned to the team. "Let's finish this." The doors to the reactor room groaned as they opened, revealing the heart of the station, a vast chamber filled with humming machinery, pulsing lights, and thrumming power conduits. But the overwhelming sight that greeted them was not the familiar hum of Earth's technology. Instead, it felt alien, distorted. The room was alive with a low, unsettling energy, the kind that could only come from a place where human ingenuity had been twisted into something unrecognizable. It was clear that Damien had already begun to corrupt this part of the station, using the Zaldar's methods to bind it to their will. The team moved cautiously into the room, their weapons raised and their eyes scanning every corner. Lila's pulse quickened, but she kept her focus. She knew the stakes. If they failed here, everything humanity had fought for would be lost. The future of Earth, of humanity, hinged on what happened in the next few minutes. "This is it," Leela said, her voice tight. "We need to hit the main control panels and trigger the reset before Damien can stop us. He won't let us go down without a fight." Brigham, his eyes flicking between the power conduits and the shadows in the room, gave a grim nod. "We're ready, but we'll need to be quick. The Zaldar are probably already on their way." As they made their way deeper into the room, the atmosphere grew thicker with a palpable sense of dread. The walls seemed to shift, as if the room itself were reacting to their presence. The hum from the machinery grew louder, and soon the team could hear the faint crackling of energy all around them. Something was watching them. Then, from the shadows at the far end of the room, a figure stepped forward. Lila's heart stopped. It was Damien, or at least, it looked like him. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow, a strange mix of human and Zaldar features twisted together in an unnatural fusion. His skin was a sickly shade of pale blue, veins pulsing with energy as he stood tall, radiating an aura of cold power. "I see you've made it this far, Captain." Damien's voice rang out, eerily calm, yet laced with a chilling malice. "I knew you would come, but it's already too late. You should have known. Humanity is weak. You are all weak." Leela's fists clenched at her sides, but she did not respond immediately. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her, but she refused to let it show. Damien's transformation was not just physical, it was mental. He had given himself over to the Zaldar, had fused with them. And in doing so, he had become something far more dangerous. "You've gone too far, Damien," Leela said, her voice steady. despite the turmoil within her. This is not the future humanity deserves. You're not helping us. You're enslaving us. Damien's lips curled into a smile, one that sent a chill through the room. You think I'm enslaving you? No, Captain. I'm elevating humanity. I've transcended the limitations of flesh and blood. I've merged with the Zaldar to become something more. You'll understand soon enough. Before Leela could react, the room seemed to tremble, and the lights flickered again. The Zaldar forces, once thought to be scattered, now surged forward from hidden alcoves, their grotesque forms emerging from the shadows like the tendrils of some nightmarish creature. They were unlike anything Leela had seen before, hybrids of Zaldar and human technology, their bodies enhanced by the strange energy from the orb. Some had multiple arms, others wielded energy weapons, and their eyes glowed with an unnatural light. The battle began in an instant. Brygim opened fire, his shots ringing out as they cut through the first wave of Zaldar hybrids. Leela, moving with precision, joined him, her sidearm firing in quick succession, taking down one of the advancing enemies. But it was clear that the Zaldar were evolving faster than they could anticipate. Each time they took down one, another seemed to emerge, more dangerous, more relentless than the last. We don't have much time. Ash shouted, his voice panicked as he fought off a group of Zaldar with a weapon he had scavenged. We need to reach the control panel. Now. Leela nodded and motioned to the team. We push through. We have to trigger the reset. The team pressed forward, cutting through the Zaldar forces with everything they had. Each moment felt like an eternity, but they finally reached the central control panel. Lila's hands flew across the interface, trying to override the corrupted systems. The panel flickered, then sparked, and for a moment, nothing happened. Come on, she muttered under her breath, her heart pounding. She couldn't afford to fail now. She couldn't let Damien's vision of humanity's demise come true. Then, just as a Zaldar hybrid lunged at her, she slammed her fist onto a final key, triggering a sequence. The lights in the room flickered, then turned bright white. The power reactors whined, and the machinery seemed to groan in protest. Damien, Leela shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. It's over. You can't control this station anymore. Damien's eyes flashed with fury. His body rippled with energy, his form distorting in unnatural ways as he screamed in anger. But it was too late. The reactor systems began to reset, and the corrupted Zaldar technology that had taken hold of the station began to short-circuit, collapsing under the weight of the force Lila had triggered. The hybrid Zaldar screamed as their bodies flickered and vanished, the energy dissipating into the air. The station's systems, once hijacked, started to return to normal. Leela stood her ground, her eyes locked on Damien. He reached out, his hand crackling with power, but it was no use. His grip on the station, and on his own humanity, was slipping. With a final desperate cry, Damien collapsed, his body disintegrating into a cloud of energy as the Zaldar's influence crumbled away. The battle was over. As the last of the hybrid Zaldar disappeared, Leela exhaled a shaky breath, the adrenaline leaving her body in a rush. It was over, but the cost had been high. The station was in ruins, and so much had been lost. Yet, in that moment, humanity had survived. They had endured. They had won. Let's get out of here, Leela said softly. It's time to rebuild.